Hi, I'm Blake.
I'm Blair.
And I'm Jamie, and this is Better Mental Health, a podcast for men looking to build a resource and community around destigmatizing mental health.
Our hope is that we can help men to better understand themselves and find spaces where they can open up and learn through the process.
In our first episode, we share our personal mental health journeys, offering insight into the experiences that have shaped each of us and inspired the creation of this podcast. We cover topics like internalized shame, religious trauma, the effect that hair loss can have on mental health, and the impact of family members passing. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right. Hello and welcome. I wanted to pass it off to, let's say, Jamie, since you had mentioned that you don't like talking about yourself. Why don't you give us, I think we want to spend a little bit of time just kind of diving into what mental health has meant for you throughout your life and start there.
All right. Make me start. So to get started with my mental health journey, I feel like Christian Science is a good place to start for...
Yeah, give it a quick summary.
So yeah, growing up in Christian Science, which I consider to be somewhat of a cult, basically the religion focuses on transcending the material by understanding that we are spiritual beings, and by doing so, you can heal physical ailments, mental ailments. And so Christian scientists don't rely on medicine. They don't rely on therapy as a practice. They only use tools within Christian Science to solve mental or physical issues. And so growing up, that was all three of us sort of had, I think, as part of our upbringings. And for me, as a kid, I wanted to be a good Christian Scientist and try really hard to figure it out. And I thought that it was the way to live your life, and like the way to actually be a good person was to be a good Christian Scientist. So
what did that mean, being a good Christian Scientist to you specifically?
Yeah. So part of being a good Christian Scientist, I mean, it was warped, and I don't know that this is every Christian Scientist's experience, but if I was going through something like a physical issue, I would think that there was something I was doing wrong in life, like I was sinning, or like there was some sort of like physical, mental manifestation of that problem based on something that I was doing. And so I needed to be reading Science and Health more, which is our book in Christian Science. I needed to be reading the lesson or praying about it and finding some nugget of understanding that would actually make me better. And then it developed into what I consider to be like a lot of internalized shame. Because I thought that I was doing, eventually, like the pull to do things that were considered quote unquote sinning or bad became so much more intriguing to me than actually like living in the Christian Science way. And so I don't know. Is this making sense? You think this is going to be clear to those who don't know Christian Science?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I think anyone who grew up in kind of a heavily religious background can kind of relate to that piece of it. There's the added layer with Christian Science that there's some pressure to, have these like healings, quote unquote, where you were following the things you're supposed to follow and actually brought about a healing. And there's some guilt that comes with maybe not feeling like you ever got there.
Exactly.
A good summary.
That is a good summary. Yeah. Thank you for that summary, because I feel like I was getting a little lost, but yes, exactly. And so I would have issues come up. I wouldn't be able to heal them. I would blame myself. I would say it's something that I'm doing wrong. And so I just kept going through sort of ping-ponging. Like I felt like one week I was trying really hard to be this perfect kid, especially like in high school, in my high school years, I was trying to be this perfect kid. And then 1 week later, I was off doing something that was considered rebellious or, not good in Christian Science, because I was a teenager, going through puberty. I had hormones, and there was exciting things going on, parties, whatever it was. And I didn't talk about this with anybody. Like I had no outlet. Like I had zero adult figures in my life who I could relate to or talk to about it. My parents didn't feel like a safe space to talk to about it. My friends didn't understand the Christian Science component because none of them were Christian scientists.
Yeah, that was always the challenge growing up in Christian Science, is like it was such a small religion. You really didn't have like a lot, like most of your friends weren't Christian Scientists. So it was just you. Yeah.
Yep. And those who, the few kids in my Sunday school class, like I knew them, but I wasn't like close to them
in any capacity. Yeah.
Although I do remember like randomly at one point in my high school career seeing one of the kids in my Sunday school at a party, and I was like, oh,
not just me.
You're
one of the bad ones too.
Yeah. Welcome to the dark side. Yeah. Man, yeah. So I learned to kind of become the way I've like reconciled it in therapy is like I really learned to be two people. I felt like the person I was with my friends, and I felt like the person I was in the Christian Science version of myself. And both of them felt like there was like inauthenticities in the mix. Like I felt like I was faking with my friends that I was didn't have this version of me that was in Christian Science. And in Christian Science, I felt like I was faking that I didn't have this rebellious side. And it wasn't until getting into spaces like group therapy and finding that in adulthood and leaving the religion in adulthood that I was able to actually sort of merge the two selves and feel like now I have this more integrated version of myself that includes the fact that I am interested in things that might not be considered okay to my parents or the religion or whatever it is. And it includes the fact that I'm also a good person. And, I care about people, and I care about, doing good things for people. And that isn't exclusive to Christian Science. That's also included in a much more bigger picture version of the world.
So I'm curious, when did the like two selves start to merge? I think you kind of gave an overview.
Yeah, it's a big overview.
Guessing, I'm curious about like age and when you started doing group therapy.
Age-wise, I started to leave the religion just towards like the end of college. And I think that was a slow process. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was like one step and then another. And it just started to kind of slowly develop over time. After I got married is when I started doing this program called Educare, which is the Sandy Wilder space in outside of like where our college was in Elsa, Illinois.
What was it called?
Educare. And it basically was like what I now consider to be group therapy, but he called it like a deep listening group. And that was the first space where I experienced anything like that. So that was probably around the age of 26, 27. I think that's right. Maybe it was a little bit younger that I started to do this, but I started to open up some and like crack open a lot of these like different feelings and things that were coming up. And the way he set up that space was that anything you shared in that group, it was a safe space, and nobody was ever going to repeat that anywhere else. And it didn't matter what you brought up. Like that was an inherent rule within the group. And that combined with the people that were in it started to help me like unravel a lot of this stuff.
How did it feel to start? Unraveling?
Yeah, I remember it felt it felt like a drug. It felt like huge weights lifted off, but also combined with like moments of crying that I'd never experienced before. Like I remember sharing some stuff with Lauren about some internalized shame around having watched porn, and she didn't know. Nobody knew that I was watching porn as a part of my life, and I had held on to that as like a secret, and you guys knew, but like you guys were a safe space for me, and like it was kind of normal around.
We were all watching porn too.
Yeah, but
we're like, yeah, but of course,
right? To be able to integrate that into people knowing outside of like the safe space,
especially a partner.
And a partner, yeah. But I was also sharing it with this other group of, Christian Science, like sort of ex-Christian scientists who are in this like therapy-like space. And they were like, you're still here, you're still alive, you're okay. It's okay to share this. And it was like, oh, and so it was like moments like that where then, I was able to like release a lot of emotion and a lot of shame around that, where it just was like, I felt like a huge weight had been like lifted off. And there have been a number of moments like that, thanks to then continuing to do group therapy and individual therapy, where it just feels like I'm still in the process. Like I still haven't, like, there's still things that I don't share with my parents, things in this podcast they'll hear probably, and they'll be like, what?
Yeah.
But
it is a never ending process, I think.
Yeah. But the more I do it, the lighter I feel and the more myself I feel. But I feel like that's very specific to me in my journey.
I feel like a lot of young men feel probably the same way, like where there's just never like a safe space, and there's never really that opportunity to open up in the way that you had the opportunity to do so. So I'm curious if you think, like, is it just that specific environment that we need more of? And do you feel like since you started doing that, maybe some of that stigma broke down for you? Is that the reason why you continued to do it, or was it because it just felt so good that you're like, I need to keep doing this?
Yeah, I think both. Like, I think both of the things you said feel true. And I think that, I think it's true that men in general just don't have spaces to release their emotions and have whatever's going on with them that feels like maybe not acceptable, that like men are sad about something or feel, whatever emotions coming up around whatever they're experiencing. I think internalized shame is a big thing for men in general. And it doesn't look the same as what I experience in Christian Science, but maybe they were taught that they had to be tough and strong from their parents, and not show any weaknesses. But actually, in reality, we all have weaknesses. And so to have some spaces where that can be shown and revealed. And it doesn't mean that you're not a strong person. It just means that you're releasing some emotion that's been inside for a really long time, and you're actually giving yourself the space to let that happen. And like, it's hard at first. I remember it being very confusing because I felt really embarrassed about the fact that I was like, crying in front of a bunch of people. And
definitely
now it's still hard, but it's become more normal. And one of the things I've sort of learned and realized in the process is that the times where we've cried in our lives have usually been in front of people that we feel safe with. And it's because we feel loved by them. And the more you feel safe to cry, I also feel like it's because you feel safe with yourself. And the more you love yourself, the more you feel safe to cry. And so I think that that's just a part of the journey of therapy and group therapy, is an opportunity to be willing to do things that are uncomfortable, because you love yourself and because you want to take care of yourself. So that's, I think, what this is, and what my journey has led me to, and why I'm doing therapy now, is because I want to sort of like recreate that for other people. It's been so impactful for me.
Something that's coming to mind is so barriers to like initially getting started. And the other thing was, do you feel like the group entry into like the therapy space was beneficial, or would you have rather done one-on-one individually first, or what?
I was thinking about that today, actually. I was like on a drive. I was like, is it, in order to like recreate this process, does it have to be in group therapy, or can it be an individual? And I think it's both. I think that individual really gives you, especially if it's really hard for you, like if it's really hard and you can find one safe person to open up to, and you find it really difficult, I think having one safe person is a good place to start. And if you see that you're okay in that, and that it starts to feel more comfortable, adding more people to the mix adds an intensity that it can be overwhelming. So if that feels like too much for you, take your time with it. But it also, the intensity increases sort of the reward, I think. Like, the more people that see these parts of you, the more you can sort of know that you're going to be okay out in the world, because there are different personalities also in that mix. So
Yeah, there's a term that I've been kind of using a lot lately, which is sunlight is the best disinfectant, where it's like
Yeah.
sometimes you're just getting something out in the open, just saying it out loud
Yeah.
is sometimes like so enormously helpful.
Totally.
Like, because a lot of times we carry all that shit, inside.
Yeah.
We keep it inside a lot, and that just leads to you like spiraling. So like
Totally.
having an
Yeah.
environment where you can,
Yeah.
expose some of the things that you're struggling with to sunlight,
Yeah.
can be very helpful. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think it's probably a good time to transition away from me, right?
You would love that.
Yeah. But I appreciate all the questions. If it feels like there's anything else that we should address within my journey, we can go there. But
yeah, I think just one of the barrier to the reason I asked that is I feel like
Mhm.
I mean anybody who does listen, or a big thing that that I know men deal with is just like, okay, so where the hell do I even begin?
Yeah.
And are you saying like how should someone go about finding that? Yeah.
The things that people typically think about, like, oh my gosh, it costs so much money. It's like,
Yeah.
what's going to reveal? I think, Blake, in your other podcast.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
and I
those
thought it was an
barriers to
interesting
entry.
topic.
Could be cost, could be just I've never done it before, so it's scary, or I don't even know where to look. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that doing your research is worth it. Like I remember finding, like I think we got lucky with the Adhikari space because it was in our community. It was someone we knew, and it was just a unique thing. But I also happened to then later in life do my research and find a therapist that I really resonated with by like Googling and like deep diving and found a person who also does group therapy, and it ended up being sort of a similar space to the Adhikari space. But I think just doing research and finding someone that resonates with you. And I think the more that you can see someone in a video for whatever reason, like it shows who they are as people. So if there's videos out there of the people that you are looking to like do research on, I think that's a helpful way of sort of seeing what they're like. Because Lauren and I tried to for example, we tried a marriage therapist that we hadn't seen or like heard anything about, but we just like saw his website, and he ended up being terrible. And it was just like an awful experience. But like, also it's okay to have a terrible experience with a therapist and just, leave them. Like have one experience, try it out, leave them. Don't stick around. Find somebody else. You're going to waste your time and your money.
I think that's a really good point to make. Like, because if it's the first time you're trying therapy and you go, oh, that went terribly.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. It could have just been, it's
not the right person.
You didn't, mesh with the therapist or whoever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll find that right fit. And you can try things like BetterHelp and all the like online stuff if cost is a barrier, and those are cheaper ways of doing it. But I would try lots of different people if you're going to do that, because I don't know about the quality of therapists you're going to find on that type of site. But well, who's feeling like going next? Who's got some energy for it?
Jamie, you got to make the pick.
Yeah, you pass it.
All right, I'll pass to Blake, because Blake, for whatever reason your video is nice and big on my screen.
All right. Well, where to begin for my mental health journey? So I guess it probably, the thing that comes up still today for me a lot goes back to my childhood when we first moved to Colorado. I was 6 or 7 years old, and we had to live with my grandparents for, I think, about a year. And I remember that experience very well because my grandfather was a very stern person, we'll say. He didn't smile a lot. He didn't laugh. He was just a very serious person. But he was also very bluntly honest. And I was a very late bloomer, and I was pretty like small growing up. So he would make comments to me a lot about just like how small I was, how short I was. And I remember that just being like, that really screwed up my self-confidence early on.
Do you remember how old you were at this time?
Well, we were with them for about a year, so I was probably maybe 8. But by the time we moved out, and moved into our own house,
it's 8-year-olds are small.
So
I don't know if
totally.
Yeah, and of course we would see them regularly because they still lived close, and so we'd always get together for Christmas and birthdays and things like that. And for whatever reason, he just always felt the need to make some comment, about my size. So that would go on for years, just here and there, and that just kind of, like I said, wrecked my self-confidence early on. So I was getting into like high school, and I continued to be a late bloomer. I was like 5 foot tall, 100 pounds as like a freshman.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah. That was part of my journey. I relate.
But already coming in with that, just like low self-confidence, and then of course, kids can be cruel sometimes, and of course other people would like, make fun of me and stuff for being smaller. And so I kind of got to the point where I absolutely hated high school. I hated being around other people. I was just like embarrassed to be in my own skin because like I just felt like I was like too small for like my age. And so that was just, that kind of like set me back mentally quite a bit. And I would just like totally would go into like recluse mode throughout most of high school. Like I would just try not to like talk to anybody throughout the day. Like I just didn't want any interaction because I was always worried where it might go. Like someone might say something like that. And like I had like a small friend group, and so it wasn't like I was a total loner, but I definitely like did not try to like branch out. I didn't go to a lot of dances. I didn't try to meet a lot of new people. I didn't like build relationships with teachers or anything like that. I just like, I wanted to be kind of like invisible. And what really helped me get out of my shell was actually, going to college and meeting you guys and establishing like a closer group of friends who like, I felt like I could actually be myself a little bit more. And I did hit like a growth spurt late, like senior year of high school, and that helped a little bit too. But then I guess just question. Moving up,
Did it feel like going to college was somewhat of a fresh start?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I mean, getting away from like that environment, I think was huge for me, because in that environment, I was still associated, like right or wrong, just with like all those negative, like disparaging comments and stuff like that. So getting away from that environment helped me just be like, okay, fresh start, like you said. And the school that we met was small, very small school, so that was like I was more comfortable there. I think if I'd gone to a big school, I would have like been too it would have been too easy to blend in, and I would have been a little bit intimidated by like bigger class sizes and things like that. So that was definitely like a life-changing decision.
That's so awesome.
To go to the right school. There's a lot of things we could say about that school now that maybe are not as good, but it was definitely the right thing for me at that time in my life. That was good. That helped me quite a bit, just to get out of my shell a little bit more. But then where really I started kind of getting back into this mental health journey was after college, started my job, and I moved to Chicago, and I was living there kind of by myself. I didn't know that many people. That's the time that I started really losing my hair. And I was like in my early 20s. And I just like, I remember having this moment where like I had kind of started to realize like, okay, my hair is going. And I was like, man, are you kidding me? Like I was like the short kid growing up, and now I'm going to be like the bald guy. Like, I was like, I can't catch a break. So that impacted me, quite a bit. You guys know that now, but maybe didn't know it back then. Just how much it impacted like my self-confidence.
I had no idea. It's
losing your hair.
Whenever I hear the story.
I remember that. Well, like the when you started telling me about it, I was like, just think of like, this is your closest group of friends, and they still didn't know that it was this one specific thing was triggering to you, or triggering. It was.
I know that's the thing that kind of got me down this path where I've started to create videos and content to like help other guys who are losing their hair, just because like going through it, I know how emotionally difficult it was. And I'm lucky to have like you guys and a close group of friends that like in most cases I feel very comfortable sharing things. But that particular thing, for whatever reason, like to be honest with you guys, like I was like embarrassed that I was so self-conscious about it, because I was like, it's just hair. Like, what am I whining about? Like it just shouldn't be a shame spiral. Yeah. It was like
you're like ashamed of being
there's
ashamed.
People yeah, like there's no winning, because it's like I know that like there's so many worse things that could be happening. There's all kinds of like terrible things going on in the world. People are like, you know, literally suffering, and I'm like here complaining that I'm losing my hair. But at the same time, it was like seriously impacting my mental health, and it was like I was thinking about it every day, like all day. It would be like distracting me from work, and like anytime I'd go by a mirror, I'd have to like look in the mirror and like check my hair, and like, you know, so it got very all consuming, and I wasn't sharing with anybody. I was just keeping this all internal. So I was like spiraling, you know, telling myself things like, oh, well, you know, I'm screwed, you know, dating wise, no one's going to find me attractive anymore. All these like negative thoughts. And, you know, again, when you don't share those things, you just kind of spiral and make those worse and worse. And then nowadays it's so easy to like get stuck in algorithms and find comments that sort of like affirm what you already think is true. So you'd like, you know, read comments like, oh yeah, no one would date, you know, a bald guy, not in their early 20s, you know, that's not supposed to happen, you know, maybe later on in life it's fine. So struggling with that for a while, you know, I ended up getting like I got a hair transplant because I was so
without telling anybody, right?
Without telling anybody. I was like, oh, I can just keep this a secret, like no one will know. Not the case, you know. It was, I think, pretty obvious. And I didn't really like it from the beginning, because I felt like I was like trying to like do this like cover up thing, and I was still being like secretive about it and not telling anyone. So I was like, just in the back of my mind, worried like, oh, what if somebody asked me about my hair? Like, oh, your hair looks different. Did you do something? And like, what am I going to say? So I was still dealing with all this anxiety about my hair, even though like at that time after the hair transplant, like I kind of got my hair back, but I was still just as anxious about my hair. So it was like the thing I had like wanted to fix didn't get fixed, which was really my anxiety.
Wow.
And
deeper root cause.
Yeah. So, you know, dealing with that for years and years and years, finally I got to the point where I was just so sick of being anxious about it. It was still starting to like recede or like thin in the back. And so I was like, okay, either like I'm going to have to get another hair transplant or it's time to move on. And I just said, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. Like I need to at least try this. And the amount of like relief, Jamie, you were talking about like a weight off your chest in your group. That was like the second my hair was gone, it was like, wow. All that anxiety was gone.
I want to back up just a second, because I remember you sharing with us that you got the transplant and like having that moment where you just started opening up to people too. Was that at all significant for you in the process, or was it more the shaving that mattered to you?
That's been huge too. And like I've been making like videos and stuff online where I'm like 100% transparent about like everything that I did, and I think just like sharing all that and being more open about it was very helpful. And that's why I tell people like, hey, if you're in the same boat and you're losing your hair and you're like dealing with anxiety issues around it, self-confidence issues, and you want to get a hair transplant, that's great. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons and just be open about it. Just be like,
talk to people about it. Yeah.
Talk to people. Be like, you know what? This is something that's always bothered me.
Yeah.
And I kind of just want to get it fixed, or I want to go, you know, see if this works. And I think most people will be like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, go for it. Like, you know, part of it, there was more stigma around it back. This was, you know, 10 years ago that I did that, the hair transplant. So it wasn't quite as common as it is today even. But yeah, definitely just like being more open about it.
Yeah,
was hugely helpful.
exactly where we were when you told me, and I was like, man, wait, how long have you been holding this in? I don't remember how many.
I don't even remember exactly where we were. Where was that?
It was just you and I. There was I was in Denver. I was visiting, and we were at some place with like ski lifts for chairs, pizza place. Anyways.
Oh yeah.
So you told Blair before you told everybody else, right? I think you did.
Yeah,
I guess so.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I was like, I'll find things that are like people are, really.
Yeah, Blair is an expert at. Getting down into those layers.
Oh
yeah. That's what kind of inspired me to want to start, a TikTok and a YouTube channel, just to like share those experiences. And
did you start talking to someone at any point throughout your journey then?
Like mental health wise?
Yeah, mental health counselor.
You did a men's group for a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I found a counselor. So it was not a therapist. But
counselor is an interchangeable term for therapist.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So I found him because I was actually also kind of just struggling with like having like the nice guy syndrome, and just being like too agreeable and not being able to like, set boundaries and things like that. But I found this therapist through this book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which promotes these like local men's groups around the country.
Yeah.
And so this guy leads one of these local groups, but he also does individual counseling and therapy. So I reached out to him to do a one-on-one session. Got kind of lucky because I did click with him pretty well. And then he said, "Hey, why don't you join our, this weekly men's group as well?" And basically once a week, I think there was about 8 people in the session, 8 other guys. And he would kind of facilitate it, but essentially everyone can kind of go around and talk about something they're struggling with that week or in general. He also had like a template that you kind of worked through. So there's like different chapters, different layers that you would work through and do, your own individual work in between sessions. And then you would kind of share some of what you've learned from that, or just if you wanted to just share like, hey, this came up this week and I've been really struggling with it. It was that opportunity similar to yours, Jamie, to just be there in like a group environment. And again, sometimes just hearing like, oh, there's other people that are struggling with stuff too. Like, even if it's not necessarily the exact same thing, but just hearing, okay, I'm not in this alone. Like there's other people who are dealing with problems too. And like, that's just kind of like, in a weird way, it's like, okay, I'm not alone, I guess.
Totally.
Like how it feels. Yeah.
I do. Yeah. One thought that's coming to mind too, coming back to the barrier to entry of this type of stuff is, I bet there are a lot of groups out there that you could go to where you could just be a listener for the first couple sessions, not actually have to participate, like talk to the person who's running it. Cause if you just want to like be there, see what it's like and see what other people do, that would probably be a good way if you're intimidated by it to get started. I don't know if that was a part of your group or not.
That's a really good point. I don't remember anyone doing that, but I'm 100% sure he would have let somebody sit in on a session if they just wanted to like check it out, but they weren't ready to participate.
Yeah. So. One question that's coming to mind, Blake, is, you talked about the huge weight off your shoulders, in like opening up and shaving your head and all that stuff. And also just like thinking about your high school version of yourself. Have you ever had an opportunity to like have a good cry about all of this stuff? Has that ever come up, or do you not see yourself as much of a crier, or what's that like for you?
I'm not too much of a crier, but I definitely have cried about that stuff. Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's,
I've never seen you cry, I don't think.
Oh yeah.
For me, sometimes I need like, I'll kind of know that like, that's what I need to do, but I'll have to like watch Lord of the Rings or like something like that. And then all of a sudden it's just like waterworks. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And
that's some self-aware, you need to cry. So you're like, what will help me trigger it? Let me watch this thing. that
I don't
gives
know
me
if
a
it was
channel.
always like a conscious thing that I did, but it was just sort of like, I'm like really feeling down right now. And like
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, I just was like, it's like a comfort thing for me. So it's like, okay, I just need to like watch something that makes me feel like comfortable and good.
Yeah.
And then just
Yeah.
part of that process be like, oh,
Yeah, the light.
Yeah.
here come the waterworks. So
The light does shine through the darkness eventually. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that makes me think of is, I mean, I don't know a whole ton about this, Blair. You probably know a little bit more, but like ketamine assisted therapy is disassociative. So it's like you're disassociate with yourself a little bit. So it gets a little bit of that barrier of shame away from the idea of crying by like having that layer of comfort associated with it. And it sort of starts that process. So if you can find a way to get more comfortable with it and have something that helps you get there, might be a good sort of like training wheels for for actually like getting there without it. But I want to I would be curious what would get you to cry without having to watch something. Not like cry like
it's not like
cry,
that's
motherfucker. But
well, I want to make sure that we've got enough time for Blair, but just sort of a general question in regards to crying, because I know I've heard from guys that like they are afraid to show that type of emotion, like to where you're crying, especially in front of like a partner or in front of their friends, because of any multitude of reasons. And
society.
There still is that societal stigma that says, boys don't cry.
Boys don't cry.
And I guess I'm just curious, if you have any thoughts on like, is there any good way to like break down? Because like it really is cathartic. Like once you like when you do have like a good cry, you're just like you're like done. You're like, wow, I actually feel better. Like
oh yeah, that's the point.
That should be every time. That's like actually feeling your emotions instead of just like pushing them down. You're like, oh, okay, so we moved through them, not just like away from them.
I have a bit of thought about that, and Blake, it actually comes from something you talked to me about, because I'm someone who's super intimidated by public speaking. And you were like, the main point was like you just have to do it in order to get through and experience it. And I think that that's part of the process of crying in front of people, is you have to see that it's okay. You kind of have to do it, and like people aren't gonna like look at you funny or like run away from you or whatever it is that you think might happen when you start crying in front of people. I think that's true for a lot of men, is it's like somehow they think that people are going to like look at them and be like, you're a weak motherfucker, like whatever it is that, but I think that the reality is we're all just going to be like, oh, like I love Blake. And like,
ideally
this is so great that, in the right spaces, but obviously you gotta have the right people. But I would hope that someday Blair and I get to see you tear up and cry.
We will. I'm
maybe
positive.
On this podcast.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into
transition.
Blair now.
Yeah, even hearing you guys talk about your experiences, I'm like, I feel like you guys were like way more self-aware than I was as a kid. My mental health journey is that I've just floated along through life, and I think either of you could probably relate to that to some degree. That's like the cis hetero white man experience of like not really having to think about things. Where do we even begin? I'm like the last of 5 children, so I was like, I just was kind of in the background, like, what the hell's going on most of the time. So I mean, like even talking about or hearing you talk about high school and things, like I had a completely different experience, obviously. Like I never felt like I was like one of the cool kids. I played football.
That's so surprising, because I think of you as probably being one of the cool kids in high school, but you didn't identify that way.
I did not identify that way, because I feel like everybody has that like the idea of the cool kids, or there is a cool group that I didn't really feel like associated with. Like it was, I was in the group of people who was like kind of, we always called ourselves like the misfits. Like we were kind of the misfits who all found each other and we're like, oh, let's just do stuff together. And the things that we were doing were like going to parties and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I started drinking early on, and that was probably a way to cope with, a lot of difficult emotions that I didn't ever allow to express themselves. But
just going into kind of what Jamie was referencing, like that's how definitely how I thought of you too when we first met. It was like, oh, this was clearly like the cool guy in high school. You just had like your look contributes to that in some way, right? Because as a first impression, that was my thought. It's interesting because you maybe had that look about you and that some of that confidence that came with it, but you are like such a deeply like emotional like person who likes to like get more into that type of discussion, which is so not what like your stereotypical jock would ever do, right?
yeah.
So do you think that sort of like dichotomy between maybe having that certain look versus like what you were actually experiencing was
Yeah.
like a weird mix for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think because I feel like the like wanting to dive deep and being like super into like deeper conversations and with people and not being surface level, that I feel like started a lot more when my dad died in 2014, because I was like, okay, so life is so short.
Yeah.
And we need to just like every experience that I have with someone needs to be like not monumental to some degree, but needs to be impactful. Um, so, but yeah, like up until that point, so like through college and the high school and then college, I was like, I feel like I still kind of I had the confidence because I think it was just like given to me because of the people that I was surrounded with and things. But there was a part of me that always was this like kind of more deep feeling person that I didn't really access until later in life. So the mental health journey continued like to go along with like the floating along thing. I never like did very well in school. I was a terrible student. I didn't have any direction. The only reason I went to this college was because the alternative was to go to the junior college in my hometown, and like did not want to do that because I was like, everybody's like, oh, it's a great junior college. You can like stay in town and then you'll be able to, transfer to a UC. And I was like, okay, so that means I need to like figure all that out. Like, no, I'm not gonna be able to do that. I didn't even know how to apply to colleges. I didn't do that at all. But then I went to this college and met you guys, and I could tell that we were just super open to just being ourselves. Maybe not initially, but yeah, I think the crux of my mental health journey is definitely like after college. I never was like super bought into Christian Science either. Like it was what I was grown up with. It was every aspect of my community and my family. Like my grandma, I think my great grandma went to Principia when it was a junior college. I don't know if you guys knew that.
No.
So it's like
legacy.
My aunt and uncle met there and got married. My mom and dad met there, got married. Another aunt and uncle were there, and then was the dean of student. Like, just I had so many.
Same with my family. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. So so that aspect of too made me curious about it. But then so went to school, started meeting you guys, and felt like I was I met like a crew that like could hold my maybe more difficult emotions and wanted to go there in a lot of ways. But then after college is when things started to like go a little haywire. I was I went to LA. Okay. So this is part of my mental health journey. It was a similar situation to yours, Blake. And like I moved to LA and I was like, I'm gonna do something, and I was just so lonely there. It was insane. Like I was living in West Hollywood with a dude from Ireland, which is great. He was awesome, but he was like 12 years older than me, so that wasn't like somebody I could like communicate with. And he was a scientist who was studying Crohn's disease, and like I was still in the mindset of like disease isn't real. So so it's like I can't even talk to you about this, though I was fascinated on like the way that he was describing things and find a cure. But so I was so lonely in LA. I was dating, but I didn't like put myself out there. I didn't go and try and find new friends. Always been an issue for me, like finding new friend groups. But and then I worked at a job that I wasn't really a huge fan of, and then in 2014 my dad passed away suddenly. Still don't really know because of Christian Science. I think it was heart related, but not really sure. Obviously that was just like completely earth shattering to me. Like I had the closest relationship with my dad for sure, out of my family. Just in my relationship with him was probably the closest. And yeah, so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why was I down here in LA when, my family's up north? So I moved home.
Was that in direct response after your dad passed, or was that did that take some time?
I've had a pattern of losing a parent and then getting fired or getting let go.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was part of it.
Yeah. So my dad passed away and then I got let go, and I'm like, all right, what the hell am I doing down here? So I moved up north and lived with my mom for like a couple months until I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. Because it was in the middle of nowhere and I wanted to be like a little bit, I'd just been in LA, so I was like, I need to be close to things. So I moved to San Francisco. That's the other part of the process, or the loop that I find myself in my life, is like losing a parent, getting laid off, meeting a new partner. So it's interesting. I've still wanted to work through therapy with that, but met a partner that was so far from what I thought I would end up with. So far from a previous partner that I had been with in college. In that she smoked weed, and it was still illegal at that point.
A real rebel.
Yeah. And I was always already a rebel, so I was like, this is dope. In more ways than one. And so then I was still against it. I was like, I had the mindset of like, oh, she smokes weed. Like, is it a problem? Like, she smokes it a couple times a week. Here I am, like, smoking daily.
Knowing you now, it's funny to hear the story.
Yeah. Oh, I was definitely concerned about her marijuana consumption. But anyway, so
funny.
I know it. So then that's when my worldview just kind of like expanded. I started to, I was like, my dad just died because he held on to these Christian Science beliefs so closely, didn't go to a doctor, and never got to see that anything was potentially wrong. Not that would have saved him necessarily. Yeah, so I was moving away from Christian Science, dating a new woman, and that was just an expansive experience. I started to smoke weed with her, and that just opened up like so many deep feelings that I was like, it's a little bit of a disassociative, it feels like, though, that I could like speak about really difficult emotions with a partner directly and not have it be like all consuming and like, I need to get the hell out.
Yeah.
Not of the relationship, but of like the room, of the conversation.
That's cool. I didn't know that was a part of this.
Yeah. And we had such great conversations. I feel like that was like contributed to us feeling so close. And not only that, then I started to do some psychedelics, and that opened everything up even more. And I think, so that just became the whole process of my...
Which ones?
Was psilocybin for sure, some mushrooms. I would do MDMA at shows. Like I started to like go to shows and listening to like live music. I was like, this is life changing. And so it was a whole journey on that front. And through that, I just kind of started to discover like I have a lot of things I need to work through and that I don't really fully understand. When I start talking about my journey into mental health stuff, I think you guys both described like how for people that you started seeing, I had been a proponent of therapy through this. Like, I started talking to people in therapy and I was like, this is amazing. Everybody should be in therapy. Meanwhile, I was not. So I was this huge proponent who wasn't partaking. And then, so then I ended up finding a therapist only because the job that I was at gave us like this 10 free sessions deal.
Wow.
Yeah. So the barrier was cost for sure for me. So once that was like completely leveled and there was a kind of a book of people that I could choose from, I was like, oh, perfect. I'll just do that. Met with one therapist named Blair, funnily enough. So I was like, this is perfect. I found my person. Me.
Was it you from the future?
Yeah. Well, she was a woman, but I mean, you never know. So the sessions weren't great though. Like it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't feeling her. It was just like, what are we doing? And that's unfortunately still where I'm at. Like I'm still I've worked with now. This is my fourth therapist that I've worked with. Another one that I found was through couples therapy with my previous partner. Yeah. So when I started to talk about like my worldview after my dad died, just like expanding, and it feels like it's just like kind of completely, it has just fully expanded to the point of like, oh my gosh, the only way that I've ever been taught to be in a relationship was monogamy. And so started to reach outside of that in like 2015, 2016, mostly with my previous partner. Her sexuality was fluid. So she was interested in exploring with women. And I was like, I can't give that. So how are we going to do that? So we found ways to explore non-monogamy without having like verbiage about it or around it, a vocabulary. So we've eventually found that together and explored that aspect of things. And the way that I've described non-monogamy is, especially for men, is like it dredges up every insecurity you've ever had in your entire life and like shoves it in your face. And it's like, deal with it.
In what way?
Anyway, if you are self-conscious about being short, if she dates an older or a taller person, you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like she's so much more interested in him.
Like, oh, he has a feature that I don't have. She must be more into that thing that I don't have.
Yes, exactly. And that's happened with several partners. One of the partners that my previous partner had, it gets confusing talking about non-monogamy sometimes, partner. But one metamor, that's another term for a partner's partner, that I had was like 6'4", and my previous partner was 6 feet. So like I never had, like anytime I had tried to pick her up during anything sexual, she was like nervous about it. But then later she would describe to me like, oh, he picked me up and like really enjoyed it. I was like, what the fuck? So that's when I started to get like, I was like, oh man, this non-monogamy stuff is super interesting to dredge up all the insecurities. And that continues to this day. But yeah, so I'm still
do you feel like it was good to like face those insecurities? And do you feel like you've grown from that and learned to become more confident with just who you are? And
100%. Yeah. I feel like those insecurities are there no matter what. And if you're not like dealing with them, they'll expose themselves in relationships in one way or the other. So this was just a way of like kind of turbocharging that process.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's super good. And I think, never have doubted whether or not that was the right decision for me. Because I think it exposed things within the relationship that you, again, like in a monogamous relationship, you might not necessarily need to, because you're like, that's not even an option. So we don't even need to talk about that. But so I guess that's my journey. And we can continue on with just more questions in that realm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you haven't talked about your mom passing, but I think that hearing you talk about your dad passing, and identifying that opened up a lot for you in deep conversation, like thinking back on you as a person, like I do think that that's true. After your dad passed, I feel like you changed to some degree as a person, and like we're more interested in the deeper conversations after that. Yeah, I think you'd always been that way, but it was like kind of, you became more introspective, and something shifted at that point.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, even in college, before you passed, I do remember you, like, you would still be that person who would like go at least like one step like deeper than most people would go. Like, you wouldn't just be like, oh, how was your day? It was like, you'd want to get into like, oh, well, what, like, oh, your day didn't go so good. Well, what happened? Like, what was, like, you wouldn't just like leave it at that surface level. You would still go a little bit deeper than most people, I think, especially at that age. But yeah, it's just that it's crazy that happened so long ago now. Like, I definitely agree with Jamie that there was a shift there after that, but it has been so long now that's just kind of how I always think of you.
Yeah, right. I'm curious about your mom passing as part of your mental health journey, and also want to dive a little bit more into you not having a good therapist ever. Like, I feel like that's another point that feels worth going into.
For sure. In this, and what we're talking about. And I kind of skipped a huge portion of my mental health journey. So, I mean, in 2022, like early 2022, my mom got sick, but with Christian Science, like that's why I probably didn't get into it, because I was like, this could be like another fucking 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah, we don't have all the time, but worth talking about as much as we can.
Yeah, so I'll just touch on it, and maybe we can dive into it in another episode. But yeah, so in 2022, my mom was kind of dealing with something, but again, with Christian Science, we're like, tell us. And she's like, nothing, I'm talking to a practitioner, which is somebody you talk to if you're, working with something spiritually to heal a physical ailment. And it she became kind of bedridden, not bedridden, but like house ridden. She would not leave the house for, I think it was 6 months before all of us kids were like, okay, mom, like, can we be real about this? Like, there's been no progress. Let's talk about what's happening. So it was July 12th, 2022 that we took my mom to the ER, which was like already insane. Like, my brother had to fly in from Phoenix or Scottsdale to take her to the emergency room with me, because she had never been to the doctor in 67 years, which is crazy. So like that fear that was there for her, which is, I think, a huge deterrent, you know what I'm saying? Deterrent, that one, for people in Christian Science to finally go the medical route. But so anyways, she got basically, they didn't give a full diagnosis, but like by the end of that night, they were like, she probably has cancer. It's most likely cancer. And then less than 12 hours later, I got a call I got an email saying there's going to be a huge layoff at my job that I'd been at for like 4.5 years in the tech world. And then I got a phone call from my supervisor, my boss at the time, and they were like, yep, we're letting you go. And I was like, cool. So my mom just got diagnosed with cancer. And they're like, sorry. You get the same severance as everybody else that was only there for like a week. So anyways, but then
fuck that.
Yeah, it was pretty shitty. And then so then my mom would always make jokes for the next couple of months. She's like, well, good thing you got fired, you can take care of me, because my mom needed like 100% care all the time. She was so I ended up becoming my mom's.
How did you take that joke? Was it taken in stride, or was it annoying?
I had no other option. Like I was like, yep. Internally I was like, fuck. That's exactly what I want to do with my life right now. Just take care of my mom. But yeah, so I ended up becoming her primary caretaker, which was just like an insane thing that we can talk about, details of some other point. But because all of my siblings have moved outside of the state at this point. So I became her primary caretaker until she died 2 months after that.
And it's probably worth mentioning that you and your mom had a fairly like rocky relationship.
Oh man,
I had already fair to say
at this point I forgot about this. Maybe like 3 or 4 years prior to 2022, I can't remember the timing on this, but I remember having a conversation with her where I was like crying to her, and I was like, if you really knew me, you would not love me. Because I had been experimenting with drugs and dating other women, and with my primary partner. So I remember having that conversation, and she was like, no, I of course would love you. I was like, all right. And then nothing changed after that. So we had a very rocky relationship is a good way to describe it. But yeah, and then so having to take care of her through that was awful. And then not only that, and then my relationship of 8.5 years was also deteriorating at that point as well. Things were happening that was kind of unforgivable. And so, in the span of 6 months, I lost my mom, or my job, my mom, my family at home, my relationship of 8.5 months. And so, it was like just a whirlwind of things. And so I'm in therapy now to try and figure out how that affected me. And
at the time that after your mom passed, and as you were going through, losing your job and the breakup and all that stuff, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but what my experience of you is you were going, like, naturally going through some kind of depression around everything that had happened.
That's very much like, what's the point?
Yeah. That was a common verbiage from you. It was like, what's the point? And I like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Do you feel as though you are out of that, or do you feel as though that's still an ongoing?
Yeah. Well, so then I was attempting to like find jobs like a couple months after my mom died. I was like interviewing, and I was like, I don't care, and there's no way I'm going to be able to tell this person in front of a camera that I like want the job enough for them to believe me. So I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I ended up doing a career change and going into a grad school program, finding a grad school program from you, Jamie. And pursuing that. But yeah, I don't, it's been throughout that it's been, everything comes in waves. The depression still as well. So it's not fully gone, and I don't know if I expect it to ever be. Just ways of dealing with it when you do kind of notice it come up. When we've talked about crying, oh my God, dude, I cry so much in good ways.
You do?
Like oh yeah.
But you don't cry in front of people.
I cried in front of,
or at least
my partner, Mackenzie, and
you don't cry in front of us.
I not?
No, you have. You're right. You have.
I'm actually curious which time that was. But
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not remembering when specifically, but there has been a moment or two.
Yeah, it's definitely harder to cry in front of people. Like when I'm alone, I can bring on the tears pretty easily. Also, ketamine is another thing that I've experimented with.
Right.
Actually, I don't know if I should say this on whatever in a podcast, but like I did get some from someone, and for like after my mom died, I had to take care of my mom's dog for a little bit, and the house that I grew up in, that both my parents had died in, and I was just like overwhelmed with life. And how I dealt with that is like I did a little bit of ketamine, and then I would like go on walks out in the countryside. And the way that it's been described to me that I really enjoyed was like since it's a disassociative, it's kind of like there's like this bundle of feelings that that are so strong, but you're able to just kind of like sit above it and just kind of look down on it and not like experience it or feel it in your body, but you're just like kind of analyzing it from a distance. And you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that you're not overwhelmed by those feelings.
Not to be a proponent of just like doing ketamine on your own, unassisted.
Yes. Do not try this at home.
Yeah, do not try this at home. But there are legal ways of doing it, and you are someone who doesn't tend to get carried away with something if you start doing something. Whereas ketamine can be addictive for people, and
1,000%. And also, I think the way that I've always explored drugs, even from the beginning, was like, I'm gonna do like a little bit just to see how I feel, instead of like diving headfirst into like a gargantuan amount, which I think has been really helpful. But no hero dose for me right off the bat.
Yes. For the sake of time, we should probably wrap up. But is there anything within that feels like we didn't cover within your mental health journey? I'm sure there's so much within all of our stories that we're not covering. But anything?
Well, you mentioned like having bad therapy experiences. It's not like I didn't get along with them. I think one of the things that I unfortunately did for a while was like I wasn't feeling it with my therapist, but I stuck with it because I was like, I need to be in therapy. And I just didn't get anywhere, and it was really frustrating. And I think that the therapy experience became bad because of that. And I think that's something I hope people can hopefully realize is like, all right, if you're not feeling it, like don't just stick it out because you want to be in therapy and you're scared to like go find someone new. Like just feel it, which is another thing I've had to work through on like figuring out what it is that I'm feeling. So
it's all an ongoing journey for all of us. And probably a good place to wrap up. I guess a good ending note is to encourage people to find those spaces where they can explore this kind of stuff and become more self-aware and learn from their emotions. And hopefully we've encouraged you all to do that by telling our stories.
Yeah, I love that.
I think
good ending, Jamie.
If we can normalize, this type of thing and take away the stigma, it can only help.
Yes. Yeah. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all next time.